So my name's Jeff Leake, and I'm the lead pastor at Allison Park Church, and I want to talk to you a little bit about one of the key factors that's involved in effective multiplication. So our church is a multi-campus church, and we are also a church planting church. So it means that we are involved regularly in sending somebody out with a vision in their heart to start something brand new. And this is such an awesome thing. Anytime you start something new, God gives you a vision for a new church or a new campus in a new territory, maybe to reach a group of people that never been reached before. And then God steps in and He works and uses our efforts and our faith to reach new people, and you start to see people saved and baptized and leaders step up and be used and potential unleashed. It's just such an incredible experience. But just like anything else, in the wonder of starting something brand new, there can be complications. And the reason why there are complications in multiplication is simply because of people. People are involved in the process. If you get married, it's going to have some wonderful things, but it'll be complicated at times. And if you have kids, that's the same way. If you pastor a church, if you revitalize a church, everything we do is complicated where people are involved. And especially when you're doing something new, things become complicated because we all enter the journey with expectations. And so we have to think about the kinds of relationships that are involved and what kinds of expectations have to be defined. So the first kind of relationship is the father-son relationship. This is between the sending pastor and the planter or campus pastor. And this relationship has to be defined because there are expectations on both parts. How much can I recruit? How much will you support me? How much finances will be involved? What are the ground rules for what happens after this church is established? Do I still belong to you? Do I still owe you anything? There's all kinds of things that need to be talked through ahead of time. And, anytime you plant, there is the joy of it, and then there's fears and complications that come as well. So the father-son relationship is one that has to be worked out. The second kind of relationship is between the sending church and the new church. Maybe everything's great between father-son, the pastor, sending pastor, and the planter, but the two entities also have to have a relationship with one another. And so there are expectations that need to be defined and worked out. And sometimes the sending church feels a little bit like, this sense of loss. We lost leaders, we lost finances. And so they go through this questioning, was this really worth it, And then the new church often feels like it's struggling, and they kind of feel like sometimes, well, I wish mama back there would do more for us. And so it's good to be able to realize that relationships take work and expectations have to get defined. And it's great to say thank you. And it's great to express blessing, and it's awesome to break fear and operate in faith. But all of those relationships have to be considered in the process. The third kind of relationship that has to get worked out is between the new work. The new church gets started in a community where there are pre-existing churches, neighboring churches, and pastors. And a lot of times what happens when a new thing gets started is the people who are already there doing ministry feel threatened. And so there needs to be relationships built between that planting pastor, that new campus pastor, and the pre-existing churches. And this is just really taking the time to introduce yourself, taking the time to hear about what's going on in the community, finding ways to collaborate, doing things in honor, speaking life. This is really the way that it works. If you have somebody new that comes into town, it's the same kind of a thing. You want to think from a kingdom perspective and realize God's bigger than the threat of this thing that's being started in your area or city. And so that's a relationship, again, you want to be thinking through. So the pastor, the father-son relationship, the sending church and the new church, the new church and the neighboring churches. There's a fourth one, and this is especially true when you work in an organization like we do, the Assemblies of God, and that is there has to be some communication between the parent church and the district that you're a part of so that everybody knows what's going on. And a lot of things get resolved, complications get resolved or lessened just when we take the time to communicate well in advance and to listen and to ask questions like, when we do this, what's important for us to consider about what's going on in that area or what's going on in the district? And then again, to take the posture of blessing toward one another. So then there's a fifth relationship that we have to consider is between the new church and new church pastor and the district. So a lot of times the parent church sends the planter and they bless them and they hope that the new pastor will be, connected to and loyal to the larger whole. But just because the parent church works at that doesn't mean that the new planter doesn't have to. And especially if you're entering a new district that you haven't belonged to before, you have to take the time, again, to find out what's going on, to listen to the heart of your leaders, to know what the expectations are, and to be a willing participant in the success of the whole. It's not just the success of what you're doing, but it's being a willing participant in the success of the whole. And then, for every district leader to think, what can we do to help these new churches succeed effectively, because we want to bless them and we want to see this reproductive thing happen more and more often. Let me give you two more. There is a sixth relationship that you have to consider, and that's between the new church, that new church pastor, and if the parent church has a network of sorts. One of the things, so I have a network called Reach Northeast, and we help plant churches all throughout the northeastern United States. And one of the things that I absolutely love is when I have a church planter that I've helped plant and given finances to and coaching to and blessing to, and they've taken people from me and sent them out. And that new planter then pays it forward, where they look out for the next guy coming along and they share the experiences that they've learned. And they share resources and they give finances and they pray and they participate in the ongoing effort to continue the planting momentum. And then when the network is hosting an event of sorts, they come and they show up and they participate with all their heart because they believe in the larger vision. That is such a healthy thing to be able to have happen. And then the final relationship has to do with one that I am uniquely experiencing right now, and this is both personal and it is also, ministry related. And that's when you get to be a grandpa. I now have 2 grandchildren naturally and going to have a third one here soon. It's the greatest thing ever. It's also really wonderful whenever you get to be a grandparent in terms of reproduction. When the church you planted plants their own church. Wow, it's awesome to see the chain reaction, something set in motion that changes the world, because it's not just about that one multiplication effort, it's about the ongoing multiplication that takes place. And so what I, as a grandpa church, get to do is sow finances and coaching and celebration into a spiritual son or daughter's church when they have the dream to multiply. And this is what Movements really is made of. It's when one church reproduces, that produces a church that reproduces, that produces a church that reproduces. And you can't do any of that without working on healthy, long-term, lasting relationships by defining expectations and choosing a posture of blessing and maintaining a mindset of the kingdom. And so I hope you'll consider those 7 relationships that you have to work on in the multiplication process.